My beloved child. There is a moment, so quiet, so easily missed, when everything that once felt still begins to move again, and you don't even realize it at first, but something within you has already started listening, as if a distant signal has finally reached your soul, and now, without words, you feel it. The waiting you carried for so long is no longer the same. And here is where it becomes strange, because nothing around you may look different yet, but deep inside, something has shifted. Like a door you didn't know existed has just unlocked, not loudly, not dramatically, just enough for you to sense it. You've been patient, more patient than anyone could see, holding on to a connection that didn't always speak, didn't always show itself clearly, and yet, you never fully let it go, and that is what makes this moment different. Because what you feel now is not imagination. Pause for a second. Why does your heart feel a little more alert lately, as if it's expecting something? Or someone, to finally step forward? It's not random. There has been a quiet pressure building, not on you, but on them. Yes, the one you felt, the one who has stayed just beyond reach, even when the connection was undeniable. Something in their world has started to change, not in a chaotic way, but in a way that leaves no more room for hesitation. And this is where you need to listen carefully. They can feel the time slipping. Not in fear, not in panic, but in realization. A realization that something real, something rare, has been standing in front of them this whole time, and the longer they stay still, the more they risk losing it. Don't skip. Because this part matters more than you think. You see, people don't move when things are easy, they move when something inside them becomes impossible to ignore, and right now, that quiet voice within them, the one they tried to silence, is no longer whispering. It's becoming clear. And clarity changes everything. There were moments when they told themselves it wasn't the right time, that things needed to be perfect, that maybe waiting was the safest choice, but something unexpected has entered their awareness. A thought they can't escape anymore. What if I wait too long? And just like that, everything begins to feel different for them. Stay till the end. Because something important is waiting for you, and it's already closer than it seems. You might not see it yet, you might not hear from them yet. But energy doesn't need permission to move, and right now, the distance between you and them is no longer growing, it's quietly shrinking. There's a pull, gentle, but undeniable. And the most surprising part? They didn't plan this. They didn't wake up one day and decide to change, it happened gradually, through small realizations, quiet moments, unexpected thoughts of you appearing when they least expected it. And each time, it became harder for them to ignore. What you need to understand is this. When someone is truly meant to step forward, life has a way of guiding them there, not by force, but by awareness. And that awareness has begun. You may have felt doubt before, moments where you questioned everything, wondering if what you felt was one-sided, or if it was ever real to them at all. But something inside you never fully agreed with that doubt. Because deep down, you knew. And now, that knowing is starting to echo back. Let me ask you something. Have you noticed how your thoughts about them have become more frequent lately, but also calmer? Less desperate, more certain? That's not coincidence. That's alignment beginning to form. Because as they start to move internally, you begin to feel it externally. And this is where the shift becomes undeniable. They are no longer comfortable staying where they are. Not because something is wrong, but because something is unfinished. And you are part of that unfinished story. There's a quiet urgency building inside them, not rushed, not chaotic, but steady, like a realization that keeps returning no matter how much they try to distract themselves. You are not just a memory to them. You are a decision they haven't fully made yet. But that is changing. Something huge is waiting for you. Not in the distant future, not in some perfect moment that never arrives, but in the space that is forming right now, between realization and action. And they are standing right at the edge of it. Here's what makes this moment so powerful. They are beginning to understand that waiting is no longer neutral. It has a cost. And for the first time, they are feeling that cost. Not as regret, but as awareness. And awareness leads to movement. Slow at first, almost invisible, but real. You might wonder, what if nothing happens? But that question doesn't carry the same weight anymore, does it? Because something inside you already feels different. More grounded, more aware, less uncertain. And that is your sign. Because when both sides begin to shift, even quietly, something begins to align in ways you cannot control, and do not need to. There is no need to chase this. There is no need to force anything. Because what is being prepared is not fragile. It's becoming ready. And readiness has a presence you can feel. Even now, in this moment, as you listen, there is a subtle calm forming within you. As if a part of you already knows. It's not over. In fact, it's just beginning. But not in the way you expected. Not loudly, not dramatically. Something deeper than that. Something that doesn't need to announce itself. Because when it arrives, you will recognize it instantly. And just before that moment fully unfolds, there is one final realization they are about to face. One that changes everything they thought they understood about you, about themselves, and about what this connection truly means. And when that realization finally settles in, they won't be able to stay still anymore. Something within them has reached a point where silence no longer feels like peace. It feels like distance they didn't intend to create, and that awareness has begun to echo in places they can't avoid, in quiet evenings, in brief pauses between thoughts, in the moments where everything slows down just enough for truth to rise. And this is where everything begins to turn in a way that cannot be undone. They are starting to see you differently now, not as someone who was simply part of their past or a feeling they could revisit later, but as someone whose presence has quietly shaped them in ways they didn't fully understand before. And that realization, it doesn't arrive loudly. It arrives like a calm knowing that settles deeper each day. And what makes this shift so powerful is that it didn't come from outside influence. It came from within them, from a place they can no longer ignore. Pause for a moment. Have you ever noticed how certain truths don't need explanation, they just arrive, and suddenly everything else starts to make sense. That is exactly where they are standing now. Because every time they tried to move forward without acknowledging you, something felt incomplete, not broken, just unfinished. Like a sentence that was never fully spoken. And the more they tried to continue as if nothing was missing, the more that quiet incompleteness followed them. Don't skip. Because what's unfolding right now is something that rarely happens this clearly. They are no longer running from what they feel. Not because they suddenly became fearless, but because they realized that avoiding it has not brought them peace, only a temporary distraction that keeps fading. And now, they are beginning to choose differently. It may not look obvious yet, it may not be visible on the surface, but internally, decisions are being made. Small ones at first. Shifts in perspective. Changes in how they think about you. Moments where they allow themselves to feel what they once pushed away. And each of these moments builds something stronger. Stay till the end. Because something important is waiting for you, and it's already unfolding in ways you can't fully see yet. There was a time when they convinced themselves that time would solve everything, that distance would make things easier, that eventually, the connection would fade into something manageable. But instead, it became clearer, more defined, more present. And that's what they didn't expect. Because clarity doesn't ask for permission, it simply arrives. And once it does, it changes the way everything is seen. Now they are beginning to understand something they didn't allow themselves to accept before. That what they feel for you is not temporary. It is not something that disappears with time. It is something that grows quieter, but stronger. And when they finally recognized that, it shifted everything. Because now, waiting feels different to them. It no longer feels safe. It feels like hesitation in the presence of something meaningful. And that realization is what is pushing them forward. Not forcefully, not suddenly, but steadily. And you are feeling this in your own way. Maybe not in words, maybe not in clear signs, but in a subtle sense that something is aligning again, that the space between you is not empty, it is active. There is movement happening, even in silence. Let me ask you something. Why does it feel like you're being prepared for something, even though nothing has officially happened yet? Why does your intuition feel more awake, more aware? As if it's anticipating a moment that hasn't arrived, but is already forming? That feeling is not random. Because as they begin to step closer internally, you begin to feel it externally. And this is where everything becomes deeply connected. They are starting to revisit moments with you, not out of nostalgia, but out of understanding. Moments they once overlooked, now carry meaning. Words you spoke, now feel important. Silences you shared, now feel full. And in those reflections, something becomes clear to them. You were never ordinary in their life. You were never just someone passing through. You were something they didn't fully understand at the time, but are beginning to understand now. And that understanding is what is guiding them forward. Because once someone realizes the value of a connection, they can no longer treat it the same way. And that's where the shift becomes undeniable. They are no longer questioning whether they feel something. They are questioning why they waited. And that question carries a weight they didn't expect. Because it leads to another realization. What if the moment to act is now? Something huge is waiting for you. Not in a dramatic, overwhelming way, but in a quiet, steady unfolding that is becoming impossible to stop. They are starting to feel a pull toward you, not out of longing alone, but out of clarity, a recognition that something real deserves movement, deserves presence, deserves to be acknowledged. And this is where their internal world begins to change more rapidly. Because once clarity meets emotion, action begins to form. They may still hesitate at times, they may still pause, but those pauses are becoming shorter, less convincing, less powerful. Because the truth is becoming stronger than the hesitation. And when truth becomes stronger, movement follows. You might not see the exact moment it happens. You might not witness the decision as it forms. But you will feel the shift. Because energy always arrives before action. And right now, that energy is already reaching you. It's in the way your thoughts have softened, in the way your heart feels more open, in the way something inside you feels less uncertain, even without clear answers. That is not coincidence. That is alignment. Because both of you are moving, even if at different speeds, toward the same realization. That this connection was never meant to remain unfinished. Pause for a second. What if everything that felt delayed was actually preparing both of you for this exact moment? What if the silence, the distance, the waiting, was not separation, but transformation? Because now, something is different. You are not the same as you were before. And neither are they. And that is what makes this moment powerful. Because when both sides grow, when both sides evolve, when both sides begin to see clearly, the connection becomes stronger than it ever was. And that strength cannot remain still for long. There is a moment approaching. A moment where hesitation finally gives way to action, where thoughts turn into words, where distance begins to close in a real, visible way. And they can feel it. Even if they don't fully understand how or when it will happen. They know something is coming. And that knowing is what is guiding them now. You may still have questions. You may still wonder how it will unfold. But deep down, you are no longer asking if it will. Because something inside you already feels the answer. And that feeling is the beginning of everything changing. They are closer than they were yesterday. More aware than they were before. More ready than they have ever been. And just as this readiness continues to build, just as the moment begins to take shape, there is one final layer of realization they are stepping into. A realization that will not only bring clarity, but will push them beyond hesitation completely. And when that happens, the space between you will no longer feel like distance at all. It will feel like the final step before something real begins. There is a quiet turning point, so subtle that most would miss it. Yet so powerful that once it begins, nothing remains the same, and right now, they are standing inside that exact moment without even realizing how close they are to changing everything. Because something inside them has finally stopped resisting. Not all at once, not in a dramatic burst, but in a gentle surrender that feels almost like relief, like they no longer have the energy to pretend that what they feel for you is something they can postpone. And that is where everything becomes real. You see, for a long time, they believed they had control over the timing, over when to act, when to wait, when to stay silent, but now they are beginning to understand something deeper. That some connections don't wait for perfect conditions. They wait for honesty. Pause for a moment. What happens when someone can no longer lie to themselves about what they feel? They begin to move. And that movement is already beginning. Don't skip. Because what is unfolding right now is the part most people never get to witness, the moment where hesitation slowly loses its hold, and clarity becomes too strong to ignore. They are starting to feel a kind of restlessness, not uncomfortable, but persistent, like something within them is gently urging them forward again and again, even when they try to stay where they are. It shows up in the smallest ways. A thought of you appearing without warning. A memory returning with more emotion than before. A feeling that lingers longer than they expected. And each time it happens, it becomes harder for them to push it aside. Stay till the end. Because something important is waiting for you, and it's already closer than you think. They are beginning to recognize that what they feel is not fading, it is evolving. And that realization changes how they see everything. Because once they understand that this connection is not disappearing, they can no longer justify ignoring it. And that is where the pressure begins to transform into purpose. Not pressure that overwhelms them, but pressure that guides them, like a quiet force reminding them that something meaningful requires their attention. And for the first time, they are listening. You may not hear their voice yet. You may not see their actions clearly yet. But something inside you already senses the difference. Because when someone shifts internally, the energy around them changes, and that change reaches you, even in silence. Have you noticed how your emotions have become more steady lately? Less confusion, more awareness? Less questioning, more quiet knowing? That is not accidental. That is the connection finding balance again. Because as they become clearer, you become calmer. As they move closer, you feel less distant. And this is where everything begins to align in a way that cannot be forced, only allowed. They are starting to revisit the idea of you, not as a possibility, but as a reality. And that shift is everything. Because when someone sees you as a reality, they begin to imagine what it would mean to truly step forward. And that thought is no longer distant for them. It is becoming present. They are thinking about what it would look like to reach out, to speak, to close the gap that has existed for so long. And even though they may still hesitate, that hesitation is no longer stopping them, it is simply slowing them down, and even that is changing. Because clarity has a way of building momentum. And once it starts, it doesn't stop. Something huge is waiting for you. Not in some far-off future, but in the unfolding of this very moment, where everything is quietly coming together, piece by piece, thought by thought, feeling by feeling. They are beginning to understand that waiting has given them enough time to see clearly, and now what remains is action. And action, no matter how small, changes everything. You might feel a subtle shift in your own energy. A sense of openness. A readiness you didn't consciously create. That is because you are being prepared too. Because when two people are meant to meet again, both are guided toward that moment, in their own way, at their own pace, until eventually, those paths begin to merge again. And that merging is closer than it has ever been. Let me ask you something. Why does it feel like something is about to happen, even though there is no clear sign yet? Why does your intuition feel more certain, more grounded, more aware, as if it already knows what your mind is still trying to understand? That feeling is your answer. Because the connection between you has never been lost, only paused, only waiting for the right moment of understanding to bring it back into motion. And that moment is now forming. They are no longer asking themselves if they should act. They are asking themselves how. And that question is the beginning of movement. Because once someone shifts from doubt to intention, everything changes. And right now, they are standing at that exact shift. You may not see the first step they take. You may not hear the first words they form. But you will feel it. Because when something real begins to move, it carries a presence that cannot be hidden. And that presence is already surrounding you. It's in the calm you feel when you think of them. It's in the quiet confidence that has replaced uncertainty. It's in the way something inside you feels ready, even without knowing why. That is not coincidence. That is alignment reaching its next phase. They are closer than ever to stepping forward. Closer than ever to turning thought into action. Closer than ever to choosing what they have felt all along, but are only now fully understanding. And just as they approach that moment, just as everything begins to come into focus, there is one final realization waiting for them. A realization that will remove the last trace of hesitation, the last shadow of doubt, the last reason to stay still. And when that realization fully settles within them, they will no longer see waiting as an option. They will see it as something they have already outgrown. And in that moment, everything you have been sensing, everything you have been feeling, everything that has been quietly building between you, will begin to move, not slowly, not uncertainly, but with a clarity that changes everything. And just before that movement becomes visible, just before the distance between you begins to close in a way you can finally see, there is a single thought forming within them. A thought so clear, so undeniable, that once it fully arrives, they won't be able to ignore it anymore.